This hearing will come to order. The chair notes the presence of a quorum under the rules. Opening statements are limited to the chairman and ranking member. However, I ask unanimous consent to include any other members' opening statements in the hearing record if submitted to the clerk by the close of business today. Hearing no objections, that's so ordered. I want to thank you and welcome you to this particular hearing. We are talking about 4 specific bills. Actually, this is going to be a longer hearing with more bills. However, we had problems with members and with witnesses who were not able to be here. So we will talk about H.R. 1776, nice number, H.R. 2175, H.R. 2489, H.R. 3806. And with that, I'm going to waive any opening statement. Mr. Grijalva, do you wish to make an opening statement?
Mr. Chairman, let me just enter my statement into the record, but at this point, I'd like to yield the balance of my time to Ranking Member DeFazio for his legislation that the Oregon Caves Revitalization Act, top priority for the member and the constituency serves. With that, I would yield my time to the ranking member.
Okay. Actually, if you want to go now, if you want to go, you're the next one on the docket anyway, so we will just assume the statement's been made. I appreciate all that.
Fine.
We're going to turn to the first panel of witnesses. We have a couple here, Mr. DeFazio, who does have a bill, as well as Mr. Johnson is here, and former Senator Allard is here with us on the first panel. We're going to add Mr. Farr, Mr. Meadows, and former Representative Schuler here when they arrive. So we'll proceed on with that. Mr. DeFazio, if you'd like to go first to recognize your bill, which has a number, and it's there somewhere, and I'm sure it's wonderful.
Yes, it is. You'll like it, Mr. Chairman.
You're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Oregon Caves Revitalization Act. It was actually President Roosevelt first proposed the Oregon Caves as a monument. It was actually not designated till the Taft administration, and by then they had shrunk the size from 2,500 to 400 acres. The Park Service proposed as early as 1939 to expand the monument, and they proposed it again in 49 and in 99 for a couple of reasons. One is we now understand the extent of the caves. We understand the watershed that feeds the unique river Styx, which I invite people to visit. It's the only underground wild and scenic river that we have, and it's also a really great point where you can crawl. You want to put on a wetsuit and crawl up inside. That's really also very special. I haven't done that part. And it has a unique, absolutely unique chateau. If you go to visit, it's kind of like going back. They have a well, they put in cable, but some people came and stole all the cable. But now they've gotten they have like a radio telephone. That's it. It's a pretty isolated area. When you walk in the lobby, there's actually a point where a stream runs through the chateau, which is sided by a Port Orford cedar bark, which is extraordinary, built in the 30s. So it's an amazing, amazing place to visit. And we need to both preserve it for future generations and potentially increase visitation in a very, very depressed area. We have an incredible range of support for this project, and I would submit some 30 letters from the local community and the counties in that area, if I could, to the record in support of this. And, you know, the Forest Service has no position on this issue. The Park Service is advocating for it. The major issue in contention is getting some fuel reduction work done. The Forest Service hasn't had the budget to do that, and that's critical to the watershed of the caves because this is a dry, hot part of Oregon. Yes, we have those, and in the summer anyway. And we're very worried about the threat of fire there. The Park Service has, you know, committed to going ahead with the needed fuel reduction work should the management pass to them. So We think that this would both benefit the area in terms of reducing fire risk. It would certainly benefit the caves, the water quality, the visitor experience, and give an opportunity for some recreational experience in terms of hiking, which really doesn't exist on 450-acre monument. And the Park Service and the Forest Service hasn't really developed trails into that area. So with that, Mr. Chairman, I thank the committee for hearing this bill and hope that the committee views it favorable.
Thank you. And any written statements you have will be added to the record. I also have a letter from the National Cattlemen's Beef Association, the Oregon Cattlemen's Association, and the Public Lands Council that will be added to the record as well. With that, we appreciate it. Let me turn now to Congressman Johnson, who has with us here number 2175, the World War II Memorial Prayer Act. I'll give you 5 minutes to present that bill to us, if you would.
Well, thank you, Chairman Bishop and Ranking Member Grijalva, for having this hearing on this legislation that I introduced, H.R. 2175, the World War II Memorial Prayer Act. This legislation very simply directs the Secretary of the Interior to install at the World War II Memorial a suitable plaque or an inscription with the words that President Franklin Roosevelt prayed with our nation on the morning of the D-Day invasion. This prayer, entitled, "Let Our Hearts Be Stout," gave solace, comfort, and strength to our nation and to our brave warriors as we fought against tyranny and oppression. The World War II Memorial was built to honor the 16 million who served in the armed forces of the United States during that great conflict, and the more than 400,000 who died during the war. Prior to introducing the legislation in 2011, I spoke to many World War II veterans in Ohio and asked them if they thought putting this prayer on the memorial would be appropriate. The answer was a resounding yes. It seems to me that if the remaining veterans of World War II are supportive of the prayer being added, we as a country should honor their request. But you don't have to take my word for it, because 2 years ago, this subcommittee was honored to have a constituent of mine, Poppy Fowler, testify in favor of this legislation. Poppy is now 90 years old and served 3 years, 10 days, 1 hour, and 10 minutes, according to his clock, in the United States Navy during World War II. He flew 35 missions in Air Group 15 on SB-2C Helldivers as both a rear gunner and photographer. I had the pleasure of escorting Poppy on an honor flight trip to visit the World War II Memorial, and we became friends. Here's a brief excerpt of Poppy's testimony at the hearing, and I quote, "I feel with no doubt that it would be appropriate that this prayer be inscribed in some manner at the World War II Memorial. Those reading this prayer will be able to recall the sacrifices made by our military, also those on the home front. This prayer came at a perilous time, yet it was answered in victory at a dear cost of lives. Today, this prayer can pertain to any military action, and under present circumstances, it is also appropriate." So I don't think that anyone in this body could be more succinct and articulate than Mr. Fowler. Like Poppy, I have no doubt that the prayer should be included among the tributes to the greatest generation memorialized on the National Mall. The majority of our colleagues also agreed with Poppy that this prayer should be included on the memorial because on January 24th, 2012, the legislation here, the House, passed by a vote of 386 to 26. Despite the best efforts of Senator Rob Portman, the legislation never made it to the Senate floor for a vote. Senator Portman has reintroduced the legislation with bipartisan support from Senator Landrieu, and hopefully this is the year that we are able to get the legislation through both chambers of Congress and to the President's desk. It is vitally important that we move this legislation as quickly as possible because time is of the essence. As some of you may know, there is estimated to be just over 1.5 million World War II veterans still living, and furthermore, it's estimated that roughly 600 World War II vets are dying every day. In other words, each week that goes by that we do not pass this legislation into law, another 4,000 World War II vets will have passed away without seeing this prayer added to the memorial. So again, I sincerely thank the chairman for having this important hearing and getting one step closer to getting this prayer placed on the memorial. And with that, Mr. Chairman, I yield back the balance of my time.
Thank you. I appreciate that, Ms. Johnson, and you're invited to stay with us. Actually, we're going to have testimony, I think, very quickly about your bill, if you'd like to join us on the dais. Senator Allard, and I don't mean to, insult you by calling you Senator, but you are on the good side here. I'm going to do an audible here. The bill you were about to discuss, the two members, the two members who will be talking about it are scheduled to arrive around 10 o'clock.
I see.
If you have a busy schedule, we'll take your testimony now. If you'd like to wait and do it at the same time they do, I'll postpone it till then.
As long as I get out in plenty of time before noon, there's not a problem. I do have a meeting at noon.
All right, if we're not done by noon,
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Appreciate
we
it.
all turn back to glass slipper. So,
Thank you.
so let me ask you just to stay there for a minute and then invite from the Interior Department, Mr. Bruce Schaefer, up to one of the microphones. And I'm going to mess up your name. I apologize. Is it Lenise Lago? Yes. I didn't mess it up? I'll try and do that better next time. Ask you to come up here. And Mr. Johnson, if you'd like to stay, they're going to be testifying about your bill, so I don't know what your schedule is.
I have another hearing, Mr. Chairman, last month.
I know, this is personal. You're going to leave anyway, right? Thank you. I appreciate you being here. What I would ask you to do then, start with Mr. Schaefer. I think you are testifying to, on both bills, right? On part of the Park Service. If you would just speak to the DeFazio bill and the Johnson bill only, you do not need to use the full time. We'll be talking about the other bills later.
All right, Mr. Chairman, I'll have a statement for the record, which I believe you already have. I'll read a summary of those on those two provisions. First, the 2175 World War II Memorial. H.R. 2175 directs the Secretary of Interior to install in the area of the World War II Memorial a suitable plaque or an inscription with the words that President Roosevelt prayed with the citizens of the United States on June 6, 1944, the morning of D-Day. The Department appreciates the importance of faith in the lives of Americans across the country, the leadership of President Roosevelt, and the courage and sacrifices of Americans during World War II and today. The World War II Memorial recognizes a period of unprecedented national unity during the defining moment of the 20th century and is devoted to the service, commitment, and shared sacrifice of Americans. The Department supports the continued application of the Commemorative Works Act, which states that the Secretary of the Interior shall design, procure, prepare, and install the plaque or inscription adhering to the important design review process and public consultation. We look forward to working with the Commission of Fine Arts and National Capital Planning Commission in designating an appropriate inscription and logistical plaque location should this legislation be enacted. Regarding H.R. 2489, the Oregon Revitalization Act. H.R. 2489 would adjust the boundary of Oregon Caves National Monument to include the addition of approximately 4,000 acres to enhance the protection of resources associated with the monument and to increase quality recreation opportunities. The lands would be added are currently managed by the U.S. Forest Service as part of the Rogue River Siskiyou National Forest. The Department supports H.R. 2489, which is consistent with the general management plan for the park. The bill contains a number of provisions related to the transfer of land from the Forest Service to the Park Service. There's concern fire management, hunting, fishing, and grazing. We would like the opportunity to work with committee, the sponsor of Forest Service, and the Bureau of Land Management on grazing provisions. The bill would also designate the subterranean segment of Cave Creek as a scenic river under the Wild and Scenic Rivers Act, and it would authorize a study of several other river segments for wild and scenic river designation.
Thank you. Now, Ms. Lago, I understand you were only talking about 2489, right?
That's correct.
I don't have any questions. Let me address it simply to Mr. Johnson's bill 2175 about the World War II Memorial Prayer Act. Do you have any questions on that particular act? I don't, Mr.
And that's the memorial?
The memorial.
Yeah, if I...
Mr. Schaefer,
yeah.
you're recognized.
Thank you. Mr. Schaefer, one of the questions that was forwarded to our office, and would installing a prayer at the World War II Memorial set a new precedent? Have there been other efforts or to do that, and are you aware of any other religion to install plaques or inscriptions on memorials that you know of?
On the first question, this is very, very similar, if not identical, to the Bob Dole plaque that is also had been installed at the direction of Congress at the World War II Memorial. So it's clearly not a precedent-setting event here. Regarding religious inscriptions, there are numerous religious inscriptions on memorials, and even in Washington, D.C. So that is not precedent-setting either.
Yeah, it was raised as a separation issue in a communication we received. What you just stated there in terms of it's not a precedent, and here's other examples, if you could forward that to the committee, that would be very useful information in terms of attempting to deal with that question.
Would be happy to, Mr. Cooper.
Thank you.
Anything else?
Nope.
Okay, thank you. Then, Ms. Lago, if we'll have asked for your testimony on 2489 on behalf of the Forest Service.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Ranking Member. In light of my colleague's testimony on H.R. 2489, I'd just like to point out a couple of issues of importance to the Forest Service. The first is that I'd note that the bill provides for continuation for contracts that are already underway on the Forest Service managed portion of the proposed monument. In addition to service and stewardship contracts, which are called out in the language, I'd like to point out we have a watershed improvement contract work underway. We'd just like the understanding and the flexibility to continue with more than just stewardship and service contracts. I'd be happy to work with either the committee or the Park Service on tightening that up. In addition, we think there could be some improvements in the proposed boundary to better meet administrative needs between Forest Service and Park Service, squaring off corners, tying to natural features on the landscape. Again, we'd be happy to work with the committee or the Park Service on that. And finally, we'd like to include in the bill language that the bill becomes self-executing upon enactment. We think that would greatly speed up the transfer between the two agencies and make it administratively easier to move forward. Thank you.
All right, let me ask for questions on the DeFazio Bill 2489 specifically to that. Mr. Tipton, do you have questions on that one? Mr. Grijalva, do you have questions on that one? Let me ask a couple, if I could, here, just to satisfy. Ms. Lago, did the Forest Service provide any input in the most recent National Park Service Oregon Caves Management Plan?
The plan from 1990, we submitted comments. We didn't work side by side with the Park Service, but in the last several years, we have worked very closely with the Park Service on joint issues, fuels management projects, fire protection, signage for the local community, and things like that.
Does that include the overall management plan, though?
Not the management plan specifically, no, sir.
All right, in your testimony, you wrote, the expansion boundary as currently proposed could be adjusted in places so the new boundary better facilitated future management by both agencies. This adjustment will require further discussion between the Forest Service and NPS. This proposal has been around for a number of years. When do you expect these further discussions to continue with the Park Service? And how receptive has the Park Service been to your input? Let's just do the first question. When do you expect actually these discussions to conclude then?
So folks in the region and on the forest, in other words, the local Forest Service folks, have developed some alternatives to the current proposed monument boundary. They include sticking with natural features of the landscape. There's an old fence line. We're just suggesting that it would make it easier to survey, and because it'd be easier to survey, it'd be easier to post and just be easier for folks to know when they're on what side of the boundary if we made some of these adjustments.
Thank you. Mr. Schaefer, let me do a couple for you. How would the Park Service approach to fire management be different from the Forest Service approach?
I don't I believe what we would do, and I can't tell you that it is different from what they've done because I know there have been discussions on the ground, but clearly there would be a fuels management plan put in place immediately to mitigate fire impacts in the area. That's been what I thought was a fairly clear distinction in the way we were approaching it, but I don't know for a fact that they are not amenable to that sort of approach.
All right, can you explain the danger that would be posed to the caves if continued Forest Service management?
I think it's best described that our concerns would be, our primary mission there would be to ensure the watershed preservation of the cave. I'm not suggesting that they aren't sharing that concern right now, but that clearly is a primary mission of the Park Service. And all of the activities that are allowed now at whatever levels would be reviewed to ensure that they could or should continue in the areas they're in to ensure the preservation of the cave resource.
Ms. Lago, does the Forest Service take that into consideration right now? The watershed?
Oh, yes, we do.
Mr. Schaefer, why are you going to terminate hunting on the proposed monument expansion?
I think the bill allows for hunting to continue. The thought would be that there may be some areas where hunting is currently allowed that should be restricted. Actually, in the public input that we got in the general management plan preparation, hunting was not necessarily an activity that there was a great deal of enthusiasm for. So we would have to revisit all of those issues and are committed to doing so if this bill is enacted to see where it would be best allowed and had least impact on the cave resources.
So what you're telling me is your preference is to terminate even though it's not allowed even though it's not mandated in the legislation?
I think it might be too early to say that definitively, but I believe that the people on the ground would say there are some areas where it would be preferred to be phased out, yes.
But your testimony clearly says that is your preferred option.
It does.
Even though your verbal statement does not.
That's correct. I suppose that in that regard I'm qualifying it a bit, but yes, I think it's the preferred action of the people on the ground. But they also have committed to going through a public process before any final decisions are made.
Well, not if we pass it first, you won't, but I appreciate that. I don't have any other questions. Mr. Tipton?
No. Just wanted to get a little clarity on the hunting. Is hunting currently allowed?
Yes,
hunting,
it is.
Is that currently allowed in this area?
It is outside the cave monument boundary, yes.
Okay, and when we're talking about some of the public comment, I was just trying to follow up on what I think I was hearing, that there wasn't a lot of public interest in that in terms of some of the comment period. If it's already allowed, why would they comment? Wouldn't they assume that they could continue to hunt?
No, no, I think probably that was, public comments are open and received, and that was one of the topics that the public addressed. And again, this was a plan done back in 1998, so the comments received then were not overwhelmingly in favor of hunting at all. In fact, there was a very limited number of people who were concerned with hunting continuing there.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, I appreciate that. I do see a couple of, I was waiting for Congressman Farr to be here as well. He has not yet shown up. So, Mr. Allard, I'm not going to let you wait any longer from here. We're going to take testimony, your testimony on 1776. Could I ask the two witnesses if they would exchange for just a second here? Mr. Meadows and former Congressman Schuler, sorry. See how quickly you forget here. Let me ask you if you would come to the podium first. And Mr. Allard, we'll take your testimony on 1776. Then I'll hear from Mr. Meadows on 3806 and Mr. Schuler from 3806. And then we'll add the witnesses from the Park Service and the Interior Department. I'm forced, no, you're good. You're done, aren't you? Yeah. You can stay as long as you want to, but you don't have to. We'll invite the Interior Department as well as some other witnesses back up here to talk about these two bills. So, Senator Allard, can I have you go ahead as Representative Farr and talk about this particular piece of legislation?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and good morning. Good morning, Ranking Member Grijalva, and distinguished members of the committee. Thank you for inviting me to testify today in support of H.R. 1776, the Clear Creek National Recreation Area and Conservation Act. The Clear Creek Management Area, which I'll refer to in my testimony as the CCMA, is of vital importance to the off-highway vehicle community in the West. The 75,000 acres of the CCMA have been ranked as one of the top 10 places to ride by Dirt Rider magazine, the most popular motorcycle magazine of its type, and formerly hosted the Quicksilver Enduro, a nationally recognized event for over 30 years, from 1983 till 2007. The event was designated a National Enduro by the American Motorcyclist Association. As you are aware, this bill would create the country's first national OHV, or off-highway vehicle area, guaranteeing future access for off-highway vehicle enthusiasts who visit Central California to ride in the management area. Representative Paul Cook's bill, H.R. 1676, would also create a similar national OHV area to guarantee permanent access to Johnson Valley in Southern California. If the bill is not passed, the Bureau of Land Management's record of decision issued in February of this year will stand. Under the current record of decision, the Serpentine Area of Critical Environmental Concern, which I'm referring to as the ACEC, would be closed to all off-highway vehicles and be open only to street legal, registered vehicles for 5 days per year. The result of this closure would severely limit OHV access in the entire management area in several important ways. First, many staging areas are located in the Serpentine ACEC because it is one of the largest open areas that can accommodate riders. They're on-highway vehicles and OHVs, which generally require trailers and trucks to transport. As a result, under the current management plan, OHV enthusiasts are able to camp at the Jade Mill campsite, which resides in the Serpentine ACEC, but are unable to use the campsite as a staging area, since no HVs are permitted on trails or roads within the Serpentine ACEC. Second, and perhaps more importantly, the Serpentine area sits in the middle of the management area. Many trails run through the Serpentine area, and restricting access would fragment or eliminate many of these historically used OHV routes. Third, under the current ROD, visitors take part in motorized recreation are allowed to enter the CCMA only 5 days per year, while non-motorized visitors can enter 12 days. Thus, riders are limited to potentially less than 2 weekends of visitation. This is an especially difficult pill to swallow, not only because it is discriminatory, but also because many riders travel long distances and arrive late on Friday and leave on Sunday. Finally, the ROD has the potential to limit the total overall number of visitors. It gives the BLM State Director the ability to limit the total number of daily visitors to the area. Thus, with the administrative swipe of a pen, access can be denied to one of the best places to ride in the country. Representative Farr's 1776 would fix all of these shortcomings. Reverting to the 2005 Clear Creek Management Area Travel Management Plan would still close some historical OHV trails. It would still establish a designated system of trails in the CCMA. However, the 2005 plan would ensure access to a network of routes 218 miles long according to the 2005 plan. The routes would offer a variety of course combinations that can be varied from year to year. Competitive events would be allowed to return to the CCMA. Importantly, the Serpentine ACEC would remain open to OHVs. This would allow riders to use the Jade Mill campsite as a staging area and access longer and more challenging trails directly from camp. Additionally, it would relieve other trails from the possibility of overuse. The largest change from the 2005 plan is that the BLM would be required to charge fees to access the area. These fees would be used to maintain and improve the Clear Creek management area. By creating a special account for the fees, H.R. 1776 ensures the fees will be used at the recreation area for needed maintenance and enhancement and not in projects across the country. Even in 2005, the BLM recognized the areas for OHV recreation were decreasing, even as the popularity of OHV riding has increased. I hope we can move this legislation so that the 50,000 riders that enjoyed the Clear Creek management area in 2003 can do so again in 2014. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for your time. I look forward to answering any questions that you may have.
Okay, Senator Allard, we've kept you here a while, and we have not talked about 3806 yet. Let me see if there are any questions specifically for Senator Allard first. Then, if you'd like to stay, you're welcome to stay and participate, but if you need to go, you need to go.
Thank you, Mr.
Tipton,
Chairman.
do you have any specific questions on this bill for Senator Allard? Mr. Grijalva.
Yeah, if I may, Senator Allard, you, along with others, the sponsor of the legislation, Mr. Farr, have questioned the whole rationale for the closure and have said that the EPA risk assessment is overblown. Could you elaborate on the specifics of that risk assessment, in particular where the EPA went wrong with the science, issue being that naturally occurring asbestos in the area, and there's some of their conclusions as to the risk to health, to public health. And with that, if you wouldn't mind, Senator.
Well, it was in 2008, the Environmental Protection Agency put asbestos levels at an unacceptable use range. However, the Off-Highway Motor Vehicle Recreation Division of the California State Parks conducted a study focusing specifically on motorcycle recreation, which found that the levels of asbestos is substantially lower than the Occupational Health and Safety Administration's daily permissible exposure limit, and the amount of ambient asbestos in the California study during periods of off-highway motorcycle riding was 20 times lower than the EPA's estimate. This is lower than what the World Health Organization considers acceptable. The risk from asbestos in the CCAMA is equivalent to making or smoking less than 1 cigarette per year, I'm told. In fact, the EPA study found that all-terrain vehicles cause 3% more dust. However, under the current plan, ATVs are still allowed in the serpentine ACEC as opposed to motorcycles. There is also a study that I have. If the committee does not have that study, I would be glad to put it forward so it could be included as part of the record.
Okay. Make sure the committee gets a copy of that. It will be included as part of the record.
I will, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Lamalfa,
And the title of the study is Preliminary Analysis of the Asbestos Exposures Associated with Motorcycle Riding and Hiking in the Clear Creek Management Area at San Benito County, California.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Lamalfa, do you have questions for this witness? All right. I do have just one simple one for me, and I appreciate the fact that this bill has been worked by local interest groups on the local level. It does create definitive wilderness area, and it allows for off-road vehicle. Would you be opposed to strengthening that language, which would mandate indefinite control the off-road vehicle level so it wouldn't be changed administratively in the future?
Well, we would appreciate any effort to make sure that the off-highway vehicle opportunities remain as described in the bill. And
so you'd oppose me if I tried to strengthen that language?
Well, if we can strengthen it, yes,
all right.
Absolutely.
Thank you. I appreciate with that. Senator, with that, we conclude the questioning for you. If you'd like to stay here, we'd be happy to have you. If you have other obligations, I recognize that at the same time.
I do have other obligations, and I thank you, the chairman, for his consideration.
Thank you for being here.
Thank you.
Representative Meadows, Representative Schuler, we appreciate you being here. We have not talked about 3806, so you have the opportunity of presenting it fresh to us. Representative Meadows, if you recognize first, talk about your bill.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I am prepared to testify. I would ask if it meets with the chair's approval to allow the distinguished gentleman from the previous member, Mr. Schuler, to testify first to give a context of this, and that I would follow up. It's certainly up to the chair.
I'll be more than happy to do that. It is good, Mr. Representative Schuler, it's good to have you back here. You were a former member of this committee?
Yes, I was.
And you haven't noticed this, but if you look directly at the room, I've got you on the proper side of this room right now.
Many times you tried. Sometimes it worked.
All right, let's turn to you for the first 5 minutes to introduce the bill.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ranking Member Grijalva and members of the subcommittee, thank you for the opportunity for me to share my thoughts on the importance of Congressman Meadows' legislation, H.R. 3806, the Great Smoky Mountains National Park Agreement of 2013. I want to tell a story about a small community in the mountains of North Carolina, the Appalachian region. Swain County, less than 10,000 people live in the community. Talking about dedication for the 1943 agreement to build the Lake Fontana. It was their dedication to help supply energy sources to the eastern part of Tennessee to be able to help build military planes for World War II. It was that dedication that they gave up their land, they gave up their home sites, their schools, their businesses, and left their grave sites of their loved ones behind. With an agreement of North Carolina, TVA, Swain County, and the Department of Interior, they flooded the land and created Fontana Lake Reservoir. Fontana Dam is still one of the largest dams east of the Mississippi, supplying energy for the TVA. When these individuals left the community and traveled and dispersed elsewhere, they were given an agreement that they would have a road built to replace NC 288 so they could go revisit the home sites and grave sites of their loved ones. That agreement was supposed to build this some 35-mile road into the Great Smoky Mountain National Park. That agreement still today has a community divided. Whether or not we should pay for a settlement or to build this road. Up until 2001, the appropriations triggered the National Environmental Policy Act, analyzing several options, including the completion of this road, an estimated $700 million, or cutting through the pristine Great Smoky Mountain National Park, or a monetary settlement. The National Park Service published a final environmental impact statement on October 2nd, 2007, which said that it would advocate a financial settlement in lieu of the construction of the road. A record of decision followed shortly, calling the monetary settlement to Swain County of $52 million as Swain County as the National Park Service agency preferred alternative. With the support of both North Carolina and the Tennessee delegations, we secured $12.8 million, a partial settlement for the North Shore Road Agreement in the fiscal year 2010 through the Department of Defense Appropriations Act. In February 10th, a sign ceremony attended by Secretary Salazar, 4 parties agreed to the settlement, calling for a $52 million settlement to Swain County to be paid out over a period of years. And this trust that Swain County gave, once again, to the federal government and to keeping up their end of the bargain. But yet we find ourselves still asking for the remaining balance of the $52 million. I want to give you the statement that Secretary Salazar gave during this ceremony in Swain County. It is not often that we can end a 67-year controversy with a stroke of a pen, but that's exactly what we are doing. The federal government is providing a fair settlement to the people of Swain County while ensuring the protection of the Great Smoky Mountain National Park. In a further press release that they gave, says Secretary Salazar noted that the settlement is good for the people of Swain County because it generates much-needed revenue. And not only was this reservoir of Fontana Lake taken, but it folded in the Great Smoky Mountain National Park, so it leaves that county with 83% federally owned land. So we have a low tax base. Again, Swain County was, there was an authorization in the Appropriations Act of 2012 for $4 million, and through a technicality, that money is still sitting there today, has not been released to Swain County. I commend now my Congressman, Mark Meadows, for his continued effort and his work and his dedication to the people of Swain County and to the people of that region to be able to give back to that community. They have honored their agreement, and it's time for the federal government to continue to honor its agreement and pay the money that's so needed for a community in Swain County. Mr. Chairman, I yield back, and I thank you for the opportunity for you and the ranking member Grijalva for allowing me to be here and testify and ask for your consideration and movement of this legislation.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Appreciate you being here. Now we'll tag team back to Representative Meadows.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. To follow up, I want to thank Congressman Heath Shuler for not giving up. On January 2nd, when he was leaving office, his staff diligently was working to try to correct an injustice. And where is the injustice? $4 million was appropriated and has sit there and sits there and sits there and is yet to be paid to the people of Swain County. And we have worked diligently for the last 14 months trying to make sure that this money gets released. We have a GAO report. Mr. Chairman, I would ask that we submit this GAO report for the record.
So ordered.
This GAO report shows that indeed that under their guidelines that it is certainly within the rights of the Department of Interior to release these funds and to actually pay on this commitment. And yet, in talking to the comptroller, he has indicated that without an act of Congress, that this money is going to continue to sit there. Now, to put this in context, the original obligation to build this road was estimated to be $700 million, and yet the settlement was just a fraction of that. And yet Swain County has gotten just a fraction of that. And so I would like to offer two other pieces of information for the record. One is the press release that Congressman Heath Shuler mentioned, which Secretary Salazar announces the settlement on the North Shore Road. And the other is the memo of understanding, which has all the appropriate parties where they had signed on to this particular agreement. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. To go on further, this is the residents of Swain County in the heat of the battle of World War II did like most Americans did. They sacrificed. They said, sure, we're willing to be part of a greater effort to make sure that this was identified and the land was given up, and yet some 83% of their land is now in federal lands. Their unemployment still hovers above 10%. And all they're wanting is for the American government, the federal government, to do what they said they would do. Going back to 1943, that obligation of building a road was never committed. Then now in 2010, an agreement was reached, a settlement of some $52 million, of part of which had been paid. But then we had another $4 million appropriated. And yet it continues to sit there. It is our understanding that H.R. 3806, being the authorization to release those funds, is what is now being required. We humbly ask for the consideration of this committee to approve this so that we can get the payment given to the residents of Swain County and that justice and fairness can once again prevail. And I stand ready for any questions, Mr. Chairman.
All right. Just one. Thank you. I appreciate your testimony. Are there any questions for these two witnesses, Mr. Lamalfa, Mr. Grijalva?
Nothing, not any questions in particular, just to welcome my friend, Mr. Schuler, and the sponsor of the legislation. It's something that when you were here, we thought we took care of, and long overdue, and good to see you again.
Okay, we thank you for your testimony. We're now going to invite some others to testify about this bill and the one Mr. Allard was talking about. You're invited to join us here and stay for questioning if you'd like to. I don't know what your schedule is. No one has ever taken me up on that option of actually staying here. I'm getting used to being rejected. It's up to you. But notice that you're welcome to stay here if you have other obligations. I recognize that as well.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for your leadership. I actually have another hearing where I need to go to right now.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Heard that one before. Let me invite then, and with appreciations, let me invite then back Mr. Carl Roundtree from the National Landscape Conservation System, who will talk about 1776. Bruce Schaefer from the National Park Service will talk about 3806, and Mr. Steve is not here. Okay. Who also had I'm sorry. Well, Ms. Kortov, we'll take your written testimony. Apparently you had plane problems and are not here right now. So we'll ask you those two, if you'll come back up, testify about these two bills. Let us start with 3806, if we could, and that is Mr. Schaefer.
H.R. 3806, Great Smoky Mountain National Park Agreement Act, would provide the Park Service the authority to expend $4 million to make a payment to Swain County, North Carolina. This legislation is necessary because the Park Service currently has no authority to make this payment, which stems from a 2010 memorandum of agreement with Swain County, the Department, and TVA. The 2010 agreement provided for monetary payments subject to appropriations to settle an issue dating back to 1943 regarding the construction of a road along the North Shore and Fontana Lake, as former Congressman Schuler mentioned. Although the National Park Service had statutory authority to make previous payments to the county, that was the $12.8 million that they mentioned, there is no statutory authority to make the $4 million payment. What was requested in the 2012 appropriations. This bill would provide the necessary authority. We support the passage of this bill.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Any questions for Mr. Schaefer on this, Mr. Malfa, Mr. Grijalva? I have no questions on this particular legislation either, which means if you'd like to stay, you can. If you need to, everyone else is leaving, you might as well.
Set a precedence if I stayed, I guess.
Thank you. All right, let me turn now to Mr. Roundtree to talk about 1776 and other issues that may come up. You recognize.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman and members of the subcommittee, thank you for the opportunity to testify on H.R. 1776, the Clear Creek National Recreation Area and Conservation Act. H.R. 1776 would establish the Clear Creek National Recreation Area in San Benito and Fresno counties in California, designate the Joaquin Rocks Wilderness on public lands near the proposed recreation area, and designate 7 stream segments within BLM's Clear Creek Management Area as wild and scenic rivers. Lands within the Clear Creek Management Area present complex resource management and public health and safety issues. While we support the bill's proposed conservation designations, we cannot support provisions in the bill which would increase cancer risks to public land users and employees due to asbestos, a well-known carcinogen, within the Clear Creek Management Area's serpentine area of critical environmental concern. The Clear Creek Management Area is located in one of the largest naturally occurring asbestos deposits in the world. And until 1979, asbestos was mined in parts of the management area at a facility that is now a Superfund site. Since the 1970s, federal and state health agencies have expressed concerns about how recreational use in the management area by hikers, campers, hunters, rock collectors, and off-highway vehicle users disturbs soils containing asbestos and creates the potential for exposure and inhalation to airborne asbestos-based dust, increasing human health risks. Because of these concerns, a 30,000-acre area of critical environmental concern of the Clear Creek Management Area has been designated as the Serpentine ACEC. In 2008, an EPA report concluded that asbestos exposure for many recreational activities in the ACEC may result in excess lifetime cancer risks. The study noted that children are at greater risk than adults because they are exposed to these high levels of asbestos at an earlier age. The study also showed that visiting the management area more than 1 day per year can put adults and children above the EPA's acceptable risk range for exposure to carcinogens and increase excess lifetime cancer risk from many typical Clear Creek Management Area recreational activities, including off-highway vehicle use and hiking. Due to the identified health risks, the BLM strictly limits access to the Serpentine ACEC under the agency's Clear Creek Resource Management Plan, which was finalized in February 2014. Under the management plan, the BLM will reassess recreation opportunities and travel management decisions if significant new information becomes available on human health risks from exposure to airborne asbestos fibers in the Clear Creek Management Area. In general, the administration supports the promotion of responsible motorized and non-motorized recreation on public lands, including off-highway vehicle use in the Clear Creek Management Area. However, the National Recreation Area provisions are unclear as to whether the bill would result in increased motorized or other activities in the Serpentine ACEC and other parts of the Clear Creek Management Area. The BLM cannot support the provisions that could increase the risk of asbestos exposure to the public and its employees. And while the bill attempts to reduce BLM's liability for such exposure, the risk to the public health still remains. H.R. 1776 would designate the 20,500-acre Joaquin Rocks Wilderness and would add 7 stream segments totaling just 31 miles to the National Wild and Scenic River System. The BLM supports these provisions. Thank you for the opportunity to present testimony for H.R. 1776. I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
Okay, are there questions for Mr. Roundtree? Mr. Lamalfa, do you have questions on this particular one? Mr. Grijalva?
Yeah. Mr. Roundtree, did the revised resource management plan, which was recently finalized, adequately include the input of OHV users? And have any of these OHV users come forward to say they have concerns about the asbestos that you just outlined?
Thank you, sir. I can't respond to your last question. I don't know whether or not they have with respect to the risk posed by asbestos. I will say that the resource management plan that was developed for the Clear Creek Management Area was done with a very extensive public involvement effort, including not only OHV enthusiasts, but other recreationists in the area. Also in very close coordination with other federal and state agencies, including both the OHV Division and Commission, as well as the California State Parks and Recreation Department.
How common is it for BLM to collaborate with EPA on land use decisions out west?
We will use the best available information for developing any kind of resource management plan for developing plans of action to govern our multiple use on public lands. EPA, we felt, was the most viable source. They spent 4 years studying this when they were examining the Atlas asbestos mine, and based on our conversations with them and others within state agencies, feel it is a very viable source of information for us to use in making these decisions.
We've had testimony that the findings are overblown, inconclusive, and therefore, and are such low levels that it poses no risk to public health. EPA finds it differently. Your recommendation and your testimony finds it differently. I think that's a central question to this piece of legislation, and would ask that any additional information that might not be part of the record or your testimony regarding that specific issue be forwarded to the committee.
Absolutely, we'll be happy to.
Thank you.
Thank you. I have a couple of questions. Also, we have just heard that one of the witnesses who was not here, his plane has arrived. He's in the building somewhere. And if Mr. Kortob arrives, we're going to ask him to come and actually give his testimony as well. Mr. Garcia, do you have any questions on this one? Mr. Roundtree, let me ask a couple of questions. Who did the study on the asbestos for y'all?
It was the Environmental Protection Agency.
EPA. Do you have specific reference to the testimony that was given by Senator Allard that says that that study was exaggerated?
Yes, sir.
Have you seen Mr. Allard's study?
No, sir, I have not.
Do you have any comment about it?
Yes, sir. The IEFR report, as it's referred, I believe that's a report he may be citing in his testimony, was something that was considered by the Bureau of Land Management. In fact, the Bureau of Land Management, working with the California Parks and Recreation Division, as well as the OHV Department and the OHV Commission, discussed aspects of both the IEFR report as well as the EPA report, and they found that in terms of the values, the fact that serpentine is found in this area, that the fact that asbestos is born in serpentine, the reports are very similar. Where they differed were with respect to the risks.
So BLM did do some study about this, but you rejected those recognitions of what the risk value is?
We deferred to EPA.
That's sad. Like, I understand what asbestos means. I taught school for 30 years across from the boys' restroom. I understand what it means to be close to it and how you can recover from that. I had one request, though. Would you, obviously the agency, please provide for the committee a map that shows where all the current OHV recreation roads and trails are located within this management area?
Absolutely.
When can we get that?
We'll do that within the next week, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, because that has not been provided. We haven't had a chance to look at that. Mr. Roundtree, it's been a while since you had joined us. I do have a question that obviously several years ago there was a treasured landscape proposal that went out as people were just thinking off the top of their heads. Unfortunately, tomorrow it seems like one of those thoughts that was just off the top of their heads will come into fruition, at least according to the press reports, talking about Organ Mountain. Press stories indicate that claims were made by the sponsors in the Senate that pending that edict, that they could somehow increase border security. There are WSAs that are down there that currently prohibit that kind of activity. Do you have some way to release the WSAs administratively in that area so the border can be better patrolled?
No, sir, we do not. That, and we'll take an act of Congress to do so.
So the press indications that claims that this announcement will increase that security, there's no way of actually implementing that.
I haven't read the proclamation, sir, so I'm not sure exactly what they are saying. I will say we found that in Arizona, where we do have a number of national conservation lands, that the efforts along the border have actually been enhanced because of the attention that's been focused in these areas and the close working relationship that we've developed with Border Patrol in terms of managing these areas for illegal immigration.
Has that improved since the CBO report came out?
I'm not sure what the CBO report is. I'm sorry.
I'll come back to that then. Can you tell me the timeline on the activities leading to the pending Oregon Monument announcement? When did BLM start working on this potential designation?
BLM has not been working on a potential designation.
Even though it was part of the Treasured Landscapes proposal several years ago?
That's correct.
So you have done nothing specifically with the administration on this?
No, sir.
Do you know of any special interest groups that have?
I don't know of any special interest groups. I will say that there have been people that have met with the Bureau of Land Management to express their concerns, also to express their support for this and other areas.
Was the congressman who represents this area and has introduced legislation to conserve the area, kept informed on each of the steps along the way?
No, sir. Not that I'm aware of.
So if you haven't been consulted on the designation, how can the administration be sure that all the issues that deal with 500,000 acres of BLM land have been reviewed and concerned, especially because the sponsors had specific provisions in there dealing with WSAs? They're obviously not going to be part of the announcement. They don't have the power to change that administratively. How are those issues being addressed?
We've not seen the proclamation, Mr. Chairman. We'll certainly work with the President, work with once we've had a chance to review the proclamation, to work out whatever steps are necessary to...
With what authority?
The proclamation.
Now, how can you work with the President to deal with things that can't be done without congressional authorization?
Well, we will do everything we can within our power, working within the wilderness study areas to assure that we provide whatever resources we can to make that happen.
Wouldn't that have been better to be done in a public process before the announcement's made rather than a post-process?
Well, I can't second-guess the President, Mr. Chairman.
Why not? Everyone else does. But actually, you're not second-guessing it because the Interior Department already came out with this brainstorming idea when you did the treasured landscapes. So you're telling me after the brainstorming went through, nothing else was done to consider all these potential issues?
No, sir.
The Senate actually introduced a bill that contained probably areas that could be worked on to improve the process, to improve the safety on the border, and yet none of those are being considered, and the President hasn't gone through that. He hasn't talked to you. He hasn't talked to anyone else about it. Hasn't talked to the representative who represents this particular area. We're just going to do it.
Has not talked to us, no, sir.
Maybe that's one of the reasons why we said there should be a change in process, so that these issues should be discussed ahead of time, not post that time. Have you had the opportunity of being with us since the last, I remember the last time we were here, we asked you some questions about the wildland legislation. Have you been here since that time?
I have not.
Okay. Mr. Grijalva, do you have any other questions you wanted this witness? Oh, come on, I gave you an opening.
No.
I didn't mean to push you into it. It's okay.
No, I just want to thank you for his...
Appreciate you being here. We appreciate all the now. Do you know where the guy is?
We can just take his...
All right, what we'll do, and I hate to do this when somebody has traveled this way to give us testimony and not being able to do that, but Mr. Lamalfa, maybe you can help me out of this awkward situation.
Well, I was kind of curious about this naturally occurring asbestos phenomenon. How much bearing does this have on, not on just this, but other land use decisions in other areas around, whether it's BLM or other federal lands, what have you? Because I'm curious how much does this curtail activity, whether it's recreational like we're talking about here or other industry resource activities that would be going on? Because, again, it's a naturally occurring substance, and so how much this go? I can't speak well. How much of this goes on?
Well, in this particular situation or across all public lands? Is your question about this specific?
Well, how much prohibition is there for the other use of other public lands because of this? Is this a new thing, or is this?
This is a very unique occurrence. I think it's the largest serpentine deposit in the world, if I'm not mistaken. So it's very rare. We've actually designated an area of critical environmental concern, which we do in our resource management planning, usually to protect cultural or native plant species and animal habitat. But we also do it in order to protect public health, and this is one of the few instances where we've done that.
So is there a parts per million figure that this has to rise to, or what is the criteria in establishing?
I'd have to defer to EPA, but would be happy to give you that information if you'd like.
Do you have it then, or?
I do not, no, sir, but we can get it for you.
EPA has these numbers?
Yes, sir.
And how much time have they spent studying this zone or others like?
They studied this one for about 4 years. They started their efforts in 2004, and they completed it in 2008.
What prompted the study?
The Atlas mine site that was located within the Serpentine ACEC.
How far away is it from the site we're talking about?
It's on the site.
I mean, as far as where recreation activity would be going on?
Probably in and around the same area.
Mm-hmm. Okay. All right. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield back.
Yeah. Thank you. I appreciate that, and we stretched this long enough. Mr. Kortov, Is that pronounced properly?
Yes, sir. Thank you.
I appreciate you coming from California. The ranking member will understand. I understand you got held up in Dallas.
Unfortunately, yes.
I think the ranking member was with you in Dallas in trying to get in here. So we apologize. I appreciate your patience and effort to actually make it here. You're the last witness we have. We're ready to have your testimony on 1776. Please.
Yes, I'm going to go ahead and read from my written testimony. So
Is your mic on?
Yes. Sorry.
Yeah, just pull it close to you.
Us farm folks are used to yelling over the tractor, so. Anyway, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee, I appreciate the opportunity to appear before you today to share my views, the views of the Friends of Clear Creek Management Area, and the views of other multiple use interests about this bipartisan land use legislation. My name is Steve Kortoff. I am a native of Fresno County, located in the heart of the Central Valley. My family has been farming in this area going on 5 generations. I am the general manager for the family's organic almond packing facility. I currently reside in Fresno, California. I am a recreation and public land advocate who has championed responsible access to public lands for the last 10 years. I served on the BLM Central California Resource Advisory Council, which brings diverse interest groups together to offer land management advice to BLM. In addition, I have served as a chairman of the OHV subcommittee to the RAC, and I'm currently still the chairman. There's a little typo there. It says 2009 to 2013, and that is incorrect. It was 2006 to 2013. I've served out a significant portion of one of my colleagues' terms, and in 2 terms on top of that of my own. So I'll proceed. Mr. Chairman, before getting into the substance of my concerns, I want to give the committee a quick overview of CCMA. In 2002, Dirt Rider magazine listed Clear Creek as one of the top 10 OHV recreation sites in the country. It is located mostly in the southern San Benito County and in the coastal mountain ranges that separates the Salinas Valley from the Central Valley. As this committee knows, the BLM functionally closed the 75,000-acre unit to all user groups in May 2008. Before the emergency closure, the unit was open for OHV use on approximately 242 miles of designated routes from October 16th to May 31st. This unit also contains approximately 25 miles of county roads. I have operated OHV with family and friends and club members in CCMA since the early 1990s. Many of our family and friends have been recreating in and around CCMA for over 3 generations. I consider many BLM employees on various units to be both personal friends and professional colleagues. I and others in the OHV community, additional stakeholders, the San Benito and San Benito County found ourselves in strong disagreement with the Hollister Field Office's initial decision to issue an emergency closure in May 2008. I was actually notified of this on a way leaving Washington, D.C. I was here for some ag-related business and kind of had a bomb dropped on me. I got a phone call from the Hollister Field Office. I was really surprised. So I'll continue. Issued an emergency closure order in May 2008 and its recent 2014 record of decision, which basically codifies that initial order and renders the unit functionally closed to OHV recreation. I believe H.R. 1776 strikes the right balance between access and safety by relying on proven management as signs and public outreach currently being used by sister land management agencies to caution the recreation public about the life-threatening hazards of rock climbing, snow skiing, swimming, and boating. Between 1981 and 2007, OHV recreationists, through the California Off-Highway Motor Vehicle Recreation Grants program, contributed approximately $7 million to CCMA for trail and facility construction. for facility construction, route maintenance, resource protection, and law enforcement. No doubt during that time period, millions of dollars of appropriated funds has also been spent to manage multiple use recreation on that unit. I believe H.R. 1776 recognizes the investment of taxpayer dollars in users' fees restoring OHV recreation on the unit using NEPA-approved 2005 Clear Creek Management Area Travel Management Plan. I believe that H.R. 1776 recognizes that CCMA should be open for public use. I urge Congress to support this bipartisan legislation that designates 70,000-acre CCMA as a national recreation area with OHV recreation and other multiple-use recreation activities codified and protected in statute, including the 242 miles of routes and 400 acres of open areas identified for motorized use in the 2005 CCMA Travel Management Plan. On behalf of myself, the OHV community, and other access stakeholders, I thank the subcommittee for allowing me to testify on H.R. 1776. At this time, I would be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Mr. Lamalfa, do you have any questions for this witness?
Yeah, thank you. Well, we all know what a struggle it is to have off-road lands available to people in the hobby and the sport. And so I'm sure you run into a lot of that frustration, yes?
Yes.
Yeah. Money that's promised to go towards that ends up going to something else.
Yes.
Goes to environmental concerns or this or that. A lot of that you see, right?
Yes.
So with this proposal here for this particular area, you're hearing about how asbestos is going to harm everybody that uses that. I mean, how do we deal with that? Believe, and by the way, I'm on your side conceptually on this thing, but you're going to hear about how asbestos fibers are going to harm everyone, and so how do we answer that from your community side of it?
We find it quite interesting that BLM is using OSHA standards for the employees. However, they're using a much more stringent EPA standard for the public, which is quite unusual. Normally, an OSHA standard would be much
So an OSHA standard might be used for somebody that's working there every day, 8 hours a day, 10 hours a day, whatever, with forestry or mining or whatever outdoor industry they might be in. Someone's there all the time versus somebody who's there occasionally recreating on a dirt bike or what have you for a few hours on a weekend, 3 or 4 weekends a year. Is that kind of what you're paralleling there, sir?
Yes, I'm paralleling the lack of exposure time by the recreational community, but also it seems that the public standard or the risk analysis is the public is being held to a much higher level. So therefore, what EPA is stating is that the public, for whatever reason, cannot be exposed to the naturally occurrences of asbestos minerals as the employees. And I find that a little perplexing. And I've done a considerable amount of research over the last 8 years, and the methodology that's used to determine the risk is considered very controversial. I can supply you gentlemen with some scientific analysis that states that EPA is overestimating the risk by a substantial amount. And not only does it say that, but it states scientifically why they feel that way. So one of the issues that the public had, and primarily the off-road community, was asking, where's the physical evidence to back up the EPA risk analysis? And there's none.
Okay, thank you. I'm sorry about the interruption there as we're transitioning.
No, I understand.
Chairman Bishop did have another hearing, and so I had to take over for a moment. I'll follow up here in a minute here, but I'd offer to Mr. Grijalva if you have any questions, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. No question for the witness that just provided the testimony. Thank you very much for making it despite the wonderful stay in Dallas. should compare notes.
Dallas is a wonderful place, by the way. I just didn't want to get stuck there when I needed to be here.
Well, I don't
So
know.
no disrespect to the people of Texas or Dallas.
I won't go as far. But anyway, I was going to, Mr. Roundtree, to your knowledge, has this committee moved either the Senate or House proposal related to designating areas around Organ Mountains as a national monument?
I'm sorry, I didn't understand your question, Mr. Grijalva.
There's proposals in the Senate and the House to designate areas around Organ Mountains as a monument. Legislative initiatives. Have you seen?
The only thing I've seen has been the legislation that was introduced and that I testified on when I was before this committee last year.
Okay. Do you? Does the BLM have any authority to make the a monument designation?
No, sir. Only Congress or the President.
Do you believe that the White House coordinated with the Department of Interior to gather information related to a monument this monument designation?
I'd have to defer to the White House, Mr. Grijalva.
Thank you. With that, I have no further questions, and thank you.
Okay, thank you again. So I say it properly, is it Korotov?
Yes.
Korotov, okay, thank you. Mr. Korotov, do you feel that the OHV user comments were adequately considered in a decision like this?
No.
How long have you been recreating there yourself? Have you and your family?
I started recreating there in 1992.
92. How do you feel?
I feel pretty good.
Okay.
Actually, I'm a little bit depressed because I can't ride in my favorite riding area.
Yeah, I am. Okay. All right. Just yearning to breathe free there, huh? So to follow up on the previous thoughts, in your review, you think there's a double standard between EPA using one standard for off-roaders and OSHA has another for, say, professional industrial activity there, right?
Yeah, it's a little bit confusing that BLM for the Hollister field office staff is using the OSHA guidelines. However, when it comes to the public, it's the EPA guidelines that are being used. So you don't have similarities in that. One of the risk assessments is holding the public to a much higher standard, and it's a much lower threshold.
Okay, well, Mr. Roundtree promised he would supply us some of the EPA information from me and maybe other members of the committee on how they got there. Do you think that'll shed much light on why there's two different standards, Mr. Roundtree?
I don't know, sir. I will say that if the committee is interested, we have very, very stringent standard operating procedures for our employees out on the Serpentine ACEC, and I would be happy to provide those to the committee to give them a little better understanding of the efforts we take to ensure the safety of our employees.
And how many other areas do you know of around the country? Do you know of other areas around the country where a naturally occurring asbestos phenomena is causing people to not have access to lands?
No, sir, not to my knowledge.
This is it?
This is it, As far as the Serpentine asbestos issue is concerned.
Do you see more on the horizon? Is EPA studying more of this, or your department studying more of this?
I have no idea. I'd have to defer to EPA on that.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Would you get that and the information you're going to supply the committee to, please?
Absolutely.
Okay. Well, sir, you came, again, a long way. You got held up in Dallas. I thought that just happened 150 years ago, but would you have any more you'd like to close with, since you did make the travel and the time here on any area of this topic? I'd like to offer that to you.
Yes, if I may, just very briefly. I appreciate the ability that I've had to work with the Hollister field office and the state office. I've also been very appreciative of the former directors in the past that have always been willing to meet with me when I come to Washington, D.C. I was hoping that that would continue with the current director, but unfortunately I was unable to get him to respond to my emails or my phone calls. In closing, what I would like to say is that San Benito County, which is the home of one of the largest asbestos mines in the western United States, just happens to have the third lowest occurrence of asbestos-related disease in the whole state of California. This is why my colleagues and myself are a little bit perplexed. We see that there are scientific experts that disagree with the EPA analysis. There's a lack of physical evidence, and our question is why? So in closing, we would like a few more answers on that, but at the same time, I'd also like to convey my interest in continuing to work with the agency in some way or shape or form, finding some way to move forward. It's my hope that the legislation will pass, but at the same time, we want to continue having a good working relationship with the agency. And I'd like to convey that to Mr. Roundtree at this time. And in the meantime, while we're waiting for that, it was voted unanimously by the Resource Advisory Council to BLM that areas outside of the ACEC, which is the area of critical environmental concern, which are not under the closure, be made available to motorized recreation. And a final comment is the Atlas Superfund. That area is on a remote part of Clear Creek Management Area and is completely fenced and closed. There is no access into the former mine area. I really thank you for this time and this opportunity to be here. It's truly an honor, and it's been a humbling experience. I thank you.
You're welcome. Mr. Grijalva.
No, I'll just put it in writing. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. All right. Thank you again for your travel, Mr. Roundtree. We look for those answers from EPA and others related to that. And Mr. Kurtoff, if you would like to submit to the committee some of your frustration with not getting your questions or your emails, responses from agencies on that, direct them to us, please, to be able to look over and perhaps help you with that. Okay?
Yes. Would it be acceptable for me to forward some of the scientific opinions and things that I have that I've based my opinion on?
Of course, please do.
Okay, thank you.
All right, with that, members, we no further questions or even committee members. Thank you for witnesses again for your travel, and I'll ask that they respond in writing to all the questions submitted by subcommittee. There being no further business, without objection, the subcommittee stands adjourned.